Jared. Thank you so much for joining me on the World Vegan Travel Podcast.
Of course, really happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So, we're going to be talking about a topic today, which I think might not be the most glamorous, exciting topic. We're not talking about, these new hotels in the Seychelles at all. But we are talking about like insurance and these kind of more logistical things that we need to really think about with travel. And it's interesting because I had somebody on the podcast a few weeks ago talking about travel insurance, and it was actually our most listened to episode. So I think travel insurance is something that people are thinking more about, and they're getting a little bit freaked out about, and all of the different kinds of insurances there are. And I'm really pleased that we're going to be talking about Safety Wing and all of the things that they do, because this is such an interesting travel insurance option, and you're doing so many other amazing things to sort of adapt to a new way of working. So before we get into our topics that I just mentioned there, Jared, can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, where you work, and a little bit about your lifestyle, please?
Awesome, for sure. So I'm Jared. I'm VP Operations at Safety Wing. I started working with Safety Wing about 4 years ago, actually, as a freelance consultant. I'd worked in tech in the past, and I started to do my own freelance as a way to actually close the distance between my partner and I, because we were doing long distance. I wanted more flexibility in terms of the way I was working, and I never intended to join necessarily another company, but it was clear that Safety Wing is one of my clients was completely different than any of the rest. So after working with them for about a year, I joined as head of product, and then a couple of years ago, I switched to VP operations, which is more what I was doing before, kind of in the operations space. All of those titles I know are a bit vague, and people who don't necessarily work in tech might not even know what they do. What I do right now mostly is, I would say, two things with Safety Wing. The first one is helping with all of our systems to help us scale. So we're growing really fast. We just raised what's called a Series B. So how it works in startup language is you have like a seed round and a Series A round and a Series B round and then a Series C. So we're at the Series B stage. And what that means is every 3 to 6 months, our composition of our team is almost entirely different because we've hired so many new people. And the way we need to work is totally different. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how we collaborate together in the systems that help us move fast, but also not break too much stuff. The other thing that I do is really help everyone on the team hit their goals. So my job is to make sure we all have company goals, product goals, individual goals, and that we're all on track to hit them and motivated and excited about it. So I do a number of things, but those are two of the main things now. Safety Wing is an entirely distributed company. It's remote first. It was remote before remote was so much of a thing post-COVID. I spend about half the year in Squamish, which is where you also live, and about half the year elsewhere. So for example, like each of the last few winters, we've gone to Costa Rica for a few months. Safety Wing, because we don't have an office, gets together relatively regularly. So I usually have some sort of team gathering a couple times a year and extend that. In the fall, we're going to Bali. So I'm going to be there for 6 weeks or so. That's sort of where I work. I'm a very active and avid outdoors person. My partner and I are both vegan, which is why I was so excited. Part of the reason I was so excited to come on this podcast and talk to some of your listeners.
Yay, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much for that introduction. So, tell us a little bit about the Safety Wing insurance. I have used it a couple of times over the years. My need for it has kind of changed personally. I haven't needed this particular kind of insurance. Could you maybe explain a little bit about Safety Wing and the insurance product that the customer that it would be most suitable for?
Definitely. So I was actually a Safety Wing customer before anything else. The way I got in touch was I was one of their very early customers, and they actually asked for feedback. And that's how I got connected to Sandra, who's the CEO here, giving some customer feedback. My use case for buying it was actually I'd been working in a job in the US. I quit that job and I wanted to stay in the US as a visitor for a while, and I needed some sort of insurance. And I came across Safety Wing when I was previously at some sort of event, and I heard about the name. We actually have two products now. We have, which we'll spend most of the time talking about today, which is Nomad insurance, which is essentially travel insurance, mostly geared towards longer term digital nomads. But realistically now, people who are traveling short term use it a lot because it's just a great product. And I can tell you a bit more about that. Then we also have remote health, which is a product more geared towards remote teams. So for example, Safety Wing uses remote health because we have 100 and something employees spread across 70 countries. So we can buy remote health, and all of our employees, except for a few specific exclusions, are covered under the same health insurance. That works both outside of your home country and in your home country. We can get into it later, but we're building a sort of a suite of all these global benefits, what we call a social safety net. To come back and to talk about nomad insurance, which I think is probably most relevant for most of your listeners. Essentially what that is, travel medical insurance. So if you're going and spending any time outside of your home country, I would definitely advise thinking about travel insurance. There's a small portion of it, which is like, if your flight gets canceled or whatever, but the bigger portion is what happens if you have some sort of medical emergency while you're overseas. Typically your credit card, if you buy your flights through that, might cover you, but usually it only goes up to 2 weeks. I don't always know how strong the coverage is. So Safety Wing people buy on top of that, or when they're traveling longer than that, because it provides a lot of benefits. For example, in COVID, it helped people evacuate from their countries. I've gotten some injuries. I got bit by a stingray actually when we were at our last team gathering, and I had used Safety Wing insurance. So lots can go wrong when you're on your trip, and realistically, it's quite cheap. Like it's only $42 per month. It's like not much of a cost, but if something goes drastically wrong, it's really important that you have the coverage you need to be able to deal with it.
I just want to say that is an incredibly reasonable price. An incredibly reasonable price for travel insurance. You won't have like a huge amount of trip cancellation with that or trip interruption with that. But if you just want to be covered for medical, this is super important. I do have a couple of questions though. Does that cover medical evacuation? For example, if I got sick out of my country of where I have healthcare, in this case, Canada, if I got sick and I was too sick for a hospital there, would that cover medical evacuation to the nearest city where there was good healthcare?
In terms of medical evacuation, I'll just put a disclaimer. I'm working across all of our products, and not necessarily, you shouldn't take all of my words for granted in terms of what we cover and don't cover. I'd recommend reading the policy. But we do have medical evacuation coverage if you, for some reason, aren't able to get seen in a reliable way in a hospital around you. One thing I'll definitely mention in terms of the reasonable price, one of the reasons the price is so reasonable is because we specifically have made this product for people who are what our persona around digital nomads, who aren't necessarily going on flashy, big expenditure trips where if something happens with their $500 a night hotel, they're needing to be reimbursed for that. Although we do have coverage for those things, what we've done is build a product based on talking with hundreds of users that we believe gets the job done in terms of exactly what they need at a price that is very reasonable. That's what really separates us from a lot of other travel insurances, because they're covering a lot of things you actually don't really care about. But for us, we spent a lot of time really thinking about the coverages that people who are going to be buying our product really want and need. And the reviews are really great. So people are enjoying what we do cover.
Yeah, these days, personally, I'm using like our credit card insurance. And then for those longer trips in Canada, I'm really curious to know what it's like in other parts of the world. But with our American Express card, we can purchase this thing called top-up insurance, which you could extend this 2 week to longer. Something I'm very curious to ask you about is, do you have to be inside your country of residence before you buy the insurance? Because with the credit card insurance, and for a lot of travel insurance, actually, you have to buy it before you go away. This can be an issue for a few reasons that I won't go into right now. So can you buy it when you're out of the country that you're resident in?
You can, and you buy what you buy it, one policy, no matter where in the world you are. There is a top up that you need to pay if you're going to be in the US. So that's the only sort of exclusion. There's actually uniquely, in certain countries, like I think Canada and Australia are the only ones, but you actually have to be outside of your country to buy it. So like I buy it as soon as I land in that country. But for most, you can buy it in your home country or outside of your home country. We've tried to make it as flexible as possible, since we know people who are like us aren't always the most on top of exactly where they'll be going and when and this type of thing. So we made it super flexible.
It's just such an incredible price, I think. But of course, everyone who buys insurance, they should really look carefully at what it covers. But I will say I'm looking at the webpage right now, and it's actually very easy to understand compared with some other insurances that I've looked at in the past. I think you guys have just done an amazing job at just making it a little bit more accessible and a little bit more understandable. When it comes to making claims, I'm guessing it's like every other travel insurance that you should probably contact the emergency number before getting any treatment if you're able to do so, and probably pay out of pocket and make a claim later. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. If you're in a serious medical emergency, we have an emergency phone number to call. When I had my issue with the Stingray, I just paid out of pocket for the medical coverage and then submitted a claim online. One of the things we are focused on for sure is like simple, easy, fun. We want to make insurance something that's not so of this black box with all these corporate people who are using language that you can't actually understand. So we spend a lot of time trying to work on how we explain things and make it in a way that doesn't seem intimidating or confusing for our customers. That's one of the things that we've really built our brand on now. Whenever I go traveling and you're in anywhere, especially where there's people who are longer term travelers or so-called digital nomads, people know about Safety Wing, and we really get to know our customers and do a lot of content, things, events, etc. for those customers, and have built like an authentic following in the community in terms of being a thought leader in the space.
Fantastic. And I can see that you have a deductible and there is a limit of $250,000. Is that right?
So we have the $250 deductible, and the limit is $250,000, which in our experience, I don't know if we've had cases that have exceeded that. It's maybe if you're in the US and something goes totally drastically wrong. Sometimes you will find in some of the other more expensive coverages $2-3 million maximums. We have found, based on the data that we were able to gather when we were creating the product, that's many times more of a show thing than something people actually end up needing to use. You should make your own decisions, and I'm not an expert advisor when it comes to the policy.
Fantastic. So the Safety Wing insurance for remote teams, so many companies these days are just having their workers like all over the world, people who want to take advantage of this nomadic lifestyle. Like, I'm just imagining if there were people that maybe were listening to this podcast and they wanted to go nomadic, and one of the concerns might be that for their employer is like how to get them and look after them the correct way. So what's some information about this product that people might like to learn more about and, suggest it to their bosses, or maybe if they own a company themselves and they wanted to go remote, or what they would need to know to go on to the next steps?
Great. Well, we ran a survey recently with thousands of people and saw how many wanted to go remote if they weren't already. And if they were remote, people are thinking about, how do I become a little bit more nomadic? Especially as prices rise with inflation here in some of our more expensive countries, it's becoming more and more attractive to spend some time overseas. One of the things that people, don't necessarily think about is how great some of the benefits and what we call a social safety net you get in many of these more developed countries of which you live. So in Canada, many countries in Europe. But when you're traveling outside of your home country or living outside of your home country, that's not necessarily as strong. As well, lots of times local country coverage, even in Canada, means long delays for coverage on things, not access to certain types of procedures. That's why it's important for, even if you're just a remote worker, whether you're inside or outside of your country or not, for companies to consider purchasing private insurance. Safety Wing has developed a very unique product, similar to Nomad Insurance, in that you buy one product that works similarly all over the world, no matter what country you're in. Where this really comes into play is you're a company of 10, 20, 100 people, but they're spread across 2, 5, 10, 20 geographies. You could purchase one product and have all of your team members on generally the same price, and also getting the same coverage. So we really care a lot about equality at Safety Wing. In fact, all of our team is also on the same flat pay on our specific strategy team. So we care a lot about equality across geographies. And that's why we developed this product, so that companies don't need to go country by country in terms of deciding what type of policy to buy, what price it is. It's so cumbersome. If you're thousands and thousand person company, maybe you have many HR benefits managers who have some time and energy to go do that. But what we're finding is many are excited about SafetyWing because we provide great quality coverage with one product that works everywhere. So this is our second product, Remote Health, that's really starting to take off and is more focused on our business customers as opposed to our just like consumer, direct to consumer.
That's incredible. I remember when I was working as a teacher in an international school in Thailand. First of all, the school had to provide healthcare for all of the teachers. They were international school teachers. It was extremely expensive. They would try to do these things because the premium was very expensive for the school to pay. Part of the reason for that was teachers were choosing to go to very, very expensive hospitals. As a result, that was pushing the premiums up a little bit. So they would try and tweak it a little bit. They also had to cover us when we're going back to our home countries as well, because a lot of the time, if you've been out of the country for a while, you're not a resident for healthcare reasons of that country anymore. For example, if you're going back to the US or even in Canada as well, you have to be in Canada for 3 months in order to get healthcare, which is reasonable. So you have to have coverage when you go back home. And of course, when you're traveling around in the school holidays, it was just a logistical nightmare for the HR team to try to deal with. There'd be staff that were unhappy when certain things were cut, and it's just so difficult. This is just such a fantastic option, and I think would cut off a lot of those pain points that a lot of companies might have about having their staff going remote.
You buy one policy and they can essentially go anywhere they want. This takes us to like the grander vision of safety. What gets me so excited about it is what we're doing is creating what we're calling a social safety net for digital nomads and remote workers. In other words, like what we're calling a country on the internet. We haven't totally decided, but essentially what we want to do is all of the founders are from Norway, and Norway has a great safety net. It has health insurance, pensions, disability, these types of things where if something were to go wrong, you feel like you're being taken well care of. What we want to do is make sure that type of feeling is available to everyone, everywhere. So we've started with these health insurance related products. But in the next year, we also have coming out a global pension product, disability product, parental leave, all these particular things that are usually tied to one home country, but available globally that a company or person can purchase for themselves if they're traveling cross borders or living outside of their home country or in a country that doesn't necessarily have the types of coverages that they would like.
So are you saying that if I got a job in a particular country, for the sake of arguments, I got a job teaching in a language school, for example, and they didn't give me sick pay, are you saying that if I had been paying into what you're talking about, I might have some sort of sick pay coverage? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we're trying to make these, and whether you're traveling into that, when I worked in the US, I had a 401k that was tied in the US, and now I have some money sitting there, but I can't even access it. Right now that I've moved away, I have all these tax implications. So what we're trying to do is avoid this and create products that work, that a company can purchase or person can purchase for themselves or their employees that works in that particular country and globally. We know how many people are going nomadic. There's some statistics around it. By 2035, there could be like 1 billion people who are calling themselves nomads. People now are spending lots of time in places outside of their home country. Companies are so distributed, and it just becomes so complicated to have to figure out policies and products to make your employees feel taken care of by you, go country by country. So why don't we create it for everyone and create a product that works for everyone and is a fair cost for everyone and has global reach? So that's the vision we're working towards. We see it as sort of these building blocks. We start with these health insurance products because that's kind of the bedrock. If you don't have health insurance coverage and something goes wrong and you're sick, you're kind of screwed. But then we start to build on top of that with all these other products. In some countries you take for granted, but in many countries you don't. And what you definitely don't take for granted is the fact that you can access them from anywhere. So that's what we're working on and what I'm so excited about. And they kind of all build on each other as we go.
Right. I heard a little bit about this idea. from one of your colleagues. I was just so excited about it because I'm not an insurance nerd, but I do think about these things quite a lot. Whenever one of our travelers has a question about insurance, it usually gets directed my way. I'm thinking about myself personally. We're living in Squamish with our cats at the moment. They're in their retirement, but as business owners, when our cats are no longer with us, we hope to be living a 100% nomadic lifestyle, going from place to place, researching a destination, creating a trip out of it, having travelers come on it, so on and so forth. So I think something like this is going to be a really cost-effective thing. And I just remember something else when I was finishing up with my international school teaching job in Thailand. I had about 8 months or so from finishing off working to when I ended up coming to Canada. I needed to get some sort of insurance, but I didn't want to get a travel insurance at that time. I ended up getting you'd call it like an expat kind of insurance. You're probably aware of this, more like a American style insurance. Yes?
That's like our remote health product is more like that, where you could just go see a physio, you can go see a massage therapist, you can just go get a checkup, versus the travel insurance is like something's gone wrong and I'm in a situation and I need to get medical help, versus preventative and proactive and more comprehensive coverage would be remote health. So we have we do have a lot of individuals purchasing that. Usually companies and workers have their company purchase that for them. So it's both. Right now, while we're building out the product, are more focused on companies, but we also have it available for individuals. It was just kind of confusing a little bit between, we haven't figured out exactly how to talk about that between nomad insurance and remote health and who should use it and when. So for now, we're just keeping one focus on businesses, but individuals, if they come across it and are excited about it, which many are, go ahead. And then we have the one for individuals, which is nomad insurance.
Incredible. Yeah, I will say the insurance that I purchased for those 8 months was really quite expensive. Now, I don't know what Safety Wing's price point will be, and I'm sure you haven't even decided that yet, but it was something like nearly $800 a month for two of us.
Oh yeah, no, ours is depending on what type of coverage you get, and especially if it's with a company. A lot of people are getting it for $80 to $120 a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Amazing. Jared is so excited about this product. I know I'm going to be taking advantage of this in the future. It's such a needed thing, and it's just going to be so reassuring for people who are traveling or people who are living overseas. And you've got so many amazing products coming up. Would you mind telling our listeners how they might find Safety Wing, how to stay in touch with these big new products that you've got coming along?
Yeah, the go-to place for sure is our website. So safetywing.com. You can learn a lot about our products there. The other thing we do have is some cool tools that people can get access to. One of them that would be especially interesting for your readers is called Borderless. So essentially what that does is goes through every country in the world and gives you information about what's happening in terms of their borders and with COVID, any vaccines you need, any travel restrictions, and provides consistent updates and information about how to actually enter and things you need to know for each of those countries. You can access that through safetywing.com or borderless.safetywing.com. There you can subscribe to get updates as well as things progress in terms of specific countries and restrictions, and also just learn more about what's upcoming with Safety Wing. I'm also here to chat if anybody would like to learn more about Safety Wing. I was a user of Safety Wing, a very happy user before I started working here, and I've definitely converted many of my family and friends into loyal Safety Wing fans. We're really doing something genuine and authentic in terms of building great products, but in a way that actually helps our customers and trying to fulfill what I think is a really unique and cool vision. So I would be excited if any of you or your listeners followed us along, signing up for the newsletter. I'm also here to chat anytime. My name's Jared and my email is jared@safetywing.com. So reach out.
That's great. And I see there is a podcast as well.
Yes. So we also have, like I mentioned, we have these two products focused on two different types of users. So we have Nomad Insurance and we have Borderless, which is sort of our content project to reach those users. But we also have a lot on our Instagram, and we have, which is called Nomad Cities as well on that particular. And then we also do have a podcast, which is called Building Remotely. And that's sort of our other side of the business, focused on helping companies build remote teams and work collaboratively remotely. So Sandra, our CEO, interviews some very interesting guests on different topics related to remote work and remote companies. So that's also something I would recommend checking out too if you're a remote worker or an entrepreneur of any kind.
Fantastic. Jared, thank you so much for taking the time for chatting with me today. That was so interested. I'm so excited. When's your next travels and where are you off to?
Yeah, so we have a team gathering in Bali in early November, which I'm looking forward to. I hear there's a lot of really great vegan food options there, which my partner and I always seek out, lots of yoga and stuff, which we love. I'm very much looking forward to that. After that, probably in the winter, I'll be going back to Costa Rica. We go to Puerto Viejo, which is a lesser traveled to place on the Caribbean side. Highly recommend it. Great vibes. If anyone's in the Costa Rica area in the winter, you can hit me up.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.